In the Salin library that no one knew about because it was completely unlocked on the size of the business.
Yeah.
Hi everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. Welcome to Austin.RB. Who here is at Austin.RB for the first time ever? Wonderful. That means we get to go through introductions. My name's Bondo. I've been doing Ruby for, God, I don't know, like 7 years now. Been programming professionally for a lot longer than that. I started helping out with Austin on Rails and Austin.RB a couple of years ago. Thanks for coming out. Thanks to Capital Factory for sponsoring and giving us this awesome location. A little bit of housekeeping. For those who haven't been here before, restrooms are now available with a sweet sign. You head back towards the main desk here, take a right, and then you kind of split left and right to the men's. We're going to have a talk first by Salin, talking about functional programming in Ruby. Then we are going to take a little break, and then we're going to kind of all program together on a programming kata, which is going to help us, hopefully, if I can find something, reinforce some of the ideas that Louis talked about in this talk tonight. Otherwise, it'll just give us a nice chance to kind of pair programming with people that we haven't programmed with, or triple program or program, however we end up breaking it up. So, Louis, why don't you kick us off with introductions? Introduce yourself a little bit.
My name is Louis Salin. I used to be a Ruby developer, switched to Scala and then Haskell last April. So I've been learning a ton since then, and I was intrigued by reusing some of the new stuff I'm doing in Ruby, and that gave birth to this talk. So, I work here at Eduphoria, which is right behind those that door over there, and that's pretty much it.
Awesome.
I mean, there's more to me than that, but.
You have to listen on top.
Yeah.
Why don't we start down here, and we'll just quickly go through the room. Just say your name, say what you work on, and what brought you here tonight.
So my name's Rick. I've been doing Ruby for about 6 years, but I just recently got loose from Intel, so I'm just not working on anything.
Fantastic.
But I am interested in functional programming.
You're in the right place. Thanks, Rick.
My name is Terry, and I just recently started learning Ruby in general.
Fantastic.
I'm Rob, and brand new to Ruby, and working in the content management domain and a little bit of graph databases, and interested in meeting some folks in town and getting started with Ruby.
Great. I'm Luke DeVar. I work at Rapid 7 on Metasploit. If you don't know what that is, it's over 10-year Ruby project that is exploit code that everyone uses to test their networks. So we have the same tools hackers have. Ours are just safer to use. We are hiring if anyone's interested.
Is Trevor here tonight?
No, Trevor's sick.
Okay.
I'm Mike. Been down systems part of stuff. Not been many. Just started in Ruby for many years. Processor development, architecture, mostly C and C++.
Awesome.
Marcos, I've been doing for 2 years now.
Patrick, I work with Mr. Delivery. I'm their new developer, and just learning Rails for this.
Oh, right on. Elsa?
Yeah, so I'm a C# developer at my day job, but I use Ruby for personal projects. Actually, I haven't done that in a while, but since functional programming is interesting to me, I came here to see what it's all about.
Don't mess up, Louis.
No, the pressure is there.
Hi, I'm Bonnie. At work, I work on Java or JavaScript, depending on how masochistic my day is going. For funsies, I do Ruby, and I'm trying to do it more.
Hello, my name is Chris. I work for Bay Bridge Administrators in the office on 360, and we use Ruby. We have a Ruby on Rails app, and we also use Ruby internally, move data around with different vendors and trading partners.
Hi, I'm Kelsey. I'm actually a student at Maker Square, so I just started my 7th week
So I'm pretty new to Ruby as well, just been doing it for a couple months.
I'm Scott, Ruby since 2006. Looking for the next programming language, so seeing other representations of different paradigms, so it's that thing.
Try Elixir, functional Ruby.
Moved on from Elixir.
Daniel, I've been doing freelancing for a couple of years. I've been using Ruby for about 4 years now.
I'm Geneva. I teach kids how to design video games. I've been using Ruby on personal projects.
I'm Evan. I'm a web developer. I've been using Ruby for about 3 years now.
I'm Jimmy, student at Makersquare as well. So I'll probably use Ruby for about 2-3 months or so.
My name is Marco. I'm also a student at Makersquare. My classmates here. I've been using Ruby for about 2-3 months. It's been quite the experience. I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about the program.
Marco, I appreciate your projection. It's nice for these old years.
I'm Jeffrey. I'm also a student at the Makersquare, 7th week. So also looking forward to learning more about Ruby.
I'm Franco. I've done a little bit of Ruby.
Thank you, dude.
I'm Ben. I'm also a student at Makersquare.
I'm Catherine. I just graduated from Makersquare and I'll just put it right down. I'm looking for a job. So here I am.
I'm Lily, also a student at Makersquare, 7th week, same deal.
Alex, also a student at Makersquare.
I'm Lawrence. I'm looking for a freelancer in Ruby's.
Jason, Mr. Delivery.
Ryuka, new to Ruby.
I'm Alex Williams. I'm also new to Ruby. I'm developing a custom gaming CMS in Ruby and Ruby on Rails. So I'm on the operations side and I'm looking to learn how it's all done.
Nice.
I'm Ollie Treadwell. I'm a Rails and Angular dev, and I graduated from Dev Bootcamp.
I'm Clark. I'm a full stack developer, mainly with Ruby on Rails and Angular. Also,
awesome. I think that's all of it. Yeah, Scott's already said hello. Great. Thank you all for coming. Thank you especially to the Makerspace contingent. You guys, I am always very impressed by your group's hunger to learn. So it's gonna be a good night. Like I said, Louis is gonna talk for a little bit, take a little break, come back, work on the coding kata. Then we'll probably wander on down someplace to have a couple of drinks and kind of mingle and talk a little bit for those who are able. Quick show of hands, who's hiring for either Ruby or software development jobs right now? Okay, for those who are looking, right, you got 5 people to pester, either during the break or afterwards. So for the folks who are looking during like I said, after Louis finishes, it'll take about 5-10 minutes. If you could come on up here and just kind of congregate in the front, and then people can come up and talk and chit chat a little bit. And if you want a little less formal thing, try to stick around afterwards for some drinks, and we can talk about jobs and stuff then. So I've known Louis for a couple of years. He's been, when I met him, he was doing mainly Ruby stuff, and he's been moving deeper and deeper into functional programming ever since I've known him. He always has a lot of really good ideas about how software should be built. I met him through Scott, who also has some pretty good ideas about how software should be built. And so tonight we're going to hear about some functional programming ideas and how we can try to apply those to Ruby.
I'm not saying you should.
How we could.
How you could.
Right, yeah. Very well. Fair enough. So everybody please give a round of applause to Louis Salin.
I'm a bit nervous because this is the most unstructured talk I've ever prepared. I gave it to my coworkers on last Thursday and ran out of time, so we'll see how it goes today. It's a mix of code and notes that I took, and I try to weave them in as I go along. So, but my goal tonight is mainly to give you an idea of the type of functional programming that I've been dealing with recently, and maybe give you new ideas or plant seeds that you guys can use can go explore a little bit and dig deeper into the subjects I'm going to present tonight. So that's my main goal.
Sorry, one thing I forgot to ask. If there are questions, do you want them to bring them up like
Yeah,
during
bring
the
them up
talk?
immediately.
Or? Okay.
That's fine. No heckling, Scott. He's not listening. So, functional programming, it's on the rise. People start to hear a lot about it more and more. And so what is functional programming compared, for example, to object-oriented programming? So functional programming is going to be giving a priority or more importance to functions versus giving importance to classes and objects. It's about separating your data from the behavior that acts on that data, right? So you're going to have, you can still have objects. In fact, there's languages that use objects like Scala that are also functional programming languages. So you define objects that have data, and then you define functions that operate on that data. It's just that the functions are not necessarily in that class that owns the data. It's also the usage of immutable data types. So when you have a data type, once it's created, you don't change it. If you change it, you instead create a new copy of that data type with the changes that you wanted in it. And the reason for that is that it minimizes the impact of having an object reach an invalid state, right? So if you change something to an invalid state, then at least your part of the code that's dealing with that invalid state is the only part of your app that uses this object with invalid state, since you're dealing with a copy of something. Other pieces of your app will deal with the previous object in still its valid form. So you're kind of minimizing potential issues. Another reason you might want immutable data types is that you never have to wonder if this thing is going to change your object. It's never going to change your object. It's always going to create a new one with the new data in it. Functional programming is also a focus on what you want to do instead of how you want to do it. An example of a functional program that probably most of you have used is SQL. In terms of telling what you want instead of how you want it, SQL is best. You say, select this from this table, join with that table, and return me the first 10 rows ordered by ID. You don't care how it's going to do it. You told SQL what you want, and it returns to you the data. So a functional program is going to be a little bit the same, where you try to specify what you want, not how you want it. So why? So a functional program is going to be easier to understand. Programs are going to be more concise. There's going to be more meaning into the code, and we'll see some examples of that. And I would argue that it's easier to reuse functions than it is to reuse objects. You know, code reusability has been the holy grail of object-oriented programming, yet in the 10, 11 years I've been doing it professionally, it's very rare that you get to reuse something. It happens here and then, but most of the time you can't reuse this object because, you know what, this one makes calls to the database, or this one also emails customers, or this one deals with only these scenarios. So you always end up recreating new classes, new objects for different scenarios. Because you have less mutable state, you have a little bit less bugs. There was a book that came out recently. I have it on my desk. Maybe I'll go get it at the break if you guys are interested. It's a book from a guy that used to be, he authored a couple of Java books, design pattern books in Java, and now he has one about Scala and closure. So he takes design patterns in Java and shows how you can eliminate the need for design patterns by coding it in Scala or closure in a functional way. That's really interesting, but I won't get into that, first of all, because I only read the introduction to the book, and so I wouldn't know what I'm talking about. So how did I get into functional programming? I used to be a C# developer before I was a Ruby developer. And when lambda expressions came out in C#, I found them extremely useful. You know, it's those like you have an array or a collection of items, and then you call .each in Ruby on it, or map in C#. Ruby has map too, and then you pass in a function that operates on all these elements in the array, and then you receive a new array as a result. Or you pass in, you call filter and pass in a predicate, or you call map to change something, select to only select a few things. And I found those to be extremely powerful. Rails developers might do, I don't know, customers.find by region, you know, USA. And then you want to filter by zip code, so you could do .filter on the result, you know, and pass in a function that filters by zip code, only giving you the customers and the zip codes that you want. And then you might do another .filter if you felt like it, or if you just want the ID of the customer, you .map, and then you put in a function that returns the ID, and then you're left with an array of IDs. And that was 3 lines of code. Whereas in the past, I used to write for loops, right? For I equals 0 to how many customers I have, and then I would create this empty list that I would use as an aggregator, so that whenever I find a customer that I find interesting, you know, I put it in there, and then I go over the entire array to pluck the ID out of each element. And it's a lot of code. It's about this big on the screen, and there's a lot of potential for errors. Whereas if I only give the functions my predicates, my selection functions, give it to the array, I don't have to deal with off-by-one errors, edge cases, and stuff like that. So, I mean, you guys are probably all knowledgeable regarding that, right? So if I have an array 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, I can do select, and then in my block that I pass in for each element, I only want those that are smaller than 4, right? And I'm going to output this, and you guys need to forgive me. I don't know all the cool gems and everything. So if I run this, I get 1, 2, 3 as the result. Yes.
Can you put your text bigger so they can see it on the video, like in your editor maybe?
In the editor as well?
Yeah, because you can't really see it on the video.
Is that good behind? What video are we talking about?
It's getting recorded.
Oh.
And some people, some people like, I can't make it, but they really wanted to see the video.
All right. Do you think that will be better?
Is that
More?
good enough, Noel, you think?
Huh?
Is that good enough, you think?
Yeah,
All right.
It might be good.
Okay. Is everybody okay with what I just wrote? I know there's various levels of Ruby expertise in the room. Everybody understands what's going on here. I call select on the array, and I pass to select a function that returns a Boolean, and for each element where that function returns true, that element ends up in the final array. And you can chain those, right? So I have that select here, and then I can do .map, and then for each element, you know, I can do I plus 5. And if I run this, I end up with 6, 7, 8. So that's how I got started with functional programming. Very basic stuff, but you know, once you start doing that, it's really hard to go back to writing your own for loops. So the other thing I said was important was immutability. So let me get rid of this. There's this gem that I found, so that's how hip I am. I found a gem called values. And basically values allows you to create immutable classes, right? So I'm going to create this user class here, equals values.new, and then inside this user class there's a name. So that's my user class. Now I can have a user instance, user.new, Louis. And I can do put u1, let's see what that, initialize config. It's fairly.
What is values?
Oh, it's value no s. So it's from that values gem. So the net gem name is called values. The actual class is called value. So value.new creates a new class that is called user, and I use it just as if it was a class in Ruby. Yes.
It's similar to like OpenStructs.
I'm not familiar with OpenStruct, but it's some kind of struct. Basically what it does, it creates a class, and for every parameter I pass in, it creates a getter, but no setter. And it provides, it adds these arguments to the constructor to initialize, so that when you call new, it will create the values. So when I call this, I have my user class, nothing special. But I can create a second user with the same name, and I'll do user1 equals user2, and it should return true. Because value objects are only equal if their attributes are equal. It doesn't care about where the object is stored in memory. It doesn't care about the ID. There's no ID in this case, but there could be. As long as all the attributes are the same, it's new. I cannot change the name on this. I cannot go in and say u1.name equals Bob. This will not work. I'll get an undefined method exception. So this is one easy way to achieve immutability, is to force yourself to use classes that cannot be modified. One thing that's kind of cool is because Ruby allows monkey patching, I can also reopen the class and add some methods in there if I want to. Which we'll do at some point, but not right now. So far, so good. So immutability, using functions as parameters. Another big thing in functional programming is called referential transparency. So if I have this function here, I can call it something, doesn't matter what it's called. Something takes a parameter x and does x times x, it basically doubles it. Whenever something is called, I can replace the call to something x with the result of that function. So if I call here something 5, it will return 25. So anywhere in the program where something 5 is called, I could potentially replace it with 25 without changing the behavior of my program. However, if something before doing this makes a call to the database, and then after doing this, email customers, well, now I can't replace a call to something 5 with 25 anymore, because now customers are not being emailed. Database is not being called. So the behavior of the application will change. So when something is referentially transparent is when you're able to do substitution like that. If you cannot do that substitution, it's not referentially transparent. Now, why is that important? If I look at a piece of code and it's not functional, and I know that developers don't know about referential transparency, I want to see what a function does, I have to start reading the function. And each line and each method call, I have to dig into it and read some more code. And I could spend an entire morning reading code and trying to piece it together to see what it really does to see if I can use it or not. Whereas if something is transparent, I don't have to do a whole lot of reading, or not as much, to figure out if there's going to be side effects happening by me calling this piece of code. So it's just making my work easier if you guys are referentially transparent. And me too.
So any way to determine that or enforce that, or is that just up to the developer?
It's up to the developer, in Ruby anyway. There's languages, the one I'm using, Haskell, forces it. You cannot have side effects in a function unless you specifically put it in the methods, in the function signature, that you're doing side effects in that function.
Can't you sneak it in with unsafe though?
Huh?
You can sneak it in with unsafe though in Haskell.
Yeah, but then you see it, it's unsafe.
Well, no, if the unsafe was buried in a function you're using, you wouldn't see it right away.
No, that is true. But thankfully, most developers don't do that unless, there's a reason for it. But it's very rare. But yes, in that case, yes. You have to be aware of that. Another thing why referential transparency is important, the order in which you call the functions is not important. You can call them in any order you want and the result will be the same. The functions are also a lot easier to test because there's no side effects going on. And it allows you to reason better about functions. Now here's something I want to do real quick. I was Googling for quicksort. Everybody knows quicksort? Does anybody not know quicksort? The Makersquare people probably did algorithms, so they know quicksort, right? Who doesn't know quicksort? Everybody knows quicksort? All right. So just to recap real quick, you have a list of values unordered. You want to sort them. You take the first value in your list. It becomes your pivot. You take all the values that are smaller than that value, quicksort them. All the values that are bigger than that pivot, quicksort them. And then add the small values plus the pivot plus the bigger values, and then your list is ordered. I mean, it goes recursive. So I thought, I'll go check out in Ruby how quicksort is implemented. And I just Googled Ruby quicksort, and those are the first 4 or 5 out of 5 links probably that came out. So I thought, I'll just go check it out. See if I can make this bigger. All right. So this was a Stack Overflow question. And is there an answer somewhere? I mean, this is an answer here, right? You have the array of the length, if the length of the array is smaller than 1, and otherwise do a bunch of things. Pick a pivot, delete stuff in the array, maintain an index, create 2 empty arrays. Then for each element, you start adding stuff to the 2 arrays. And then you call quicksort on the 2 arrays. And then you flatten the whole thing, and then you're done. All right, so that's a lot of code. Let's go see how other people might be doing that. All right, this one is on GitHub. Same type of thing. You check for nil, and then you maintain your last element. You have the index of your last element. If the starting is bigger than the last, then you're done. Otherwise, take a pivot, get some min and max pointers. I'm not sure what he's doing with that. But I mean, reading this code is a bit painful. You have to take a piece of paper out, start drawing stuff, to figure out the logic of this. Oh, wow, you can even have an inconsistent state here. Interesting. So I kept looking and surely somebody has a solution that's easy to read. And I didn't check all of the search results from Google. This one's a little smaller, but still, you're maintaining indexes, you're doing a for loop, he has this temporary value here that he's maintaining, and it's not immediately obvious what you're doing with that. And then finally, I got the Wikipedia article, and if you look at the algorithm, it looks pretty much like what they implemented in Ruby. You get your pivot index, your pivot value, you swap things left and right, you have that for loop and the if that was exactly in the other. So I thought maybe everybody, they took they all took this Wikipedia article and just implemented it in their own language. So let's keep that in the back of our mind real quick, and we're going to go over the higher order functions in Ruby and how you use them. Everybody knows blocks in Ruby. That's been there since the beginning of Ruby. Anybody know this is the notation I'm going to use? It's like little arrow x, and then you pass in a block that does something with that x. So this is a lambda that takes x as a parameter right here. And the body of the function is right here. It returns x plus 1. So I could do a equals that, and I could do a, and this is how you call them. Dot, and then parentheses in your argument. And so if I do what's that, it should return 6. Okay. So I like this notation because it's common across multiple languages. I think even in Java, the new lambda notation that came out in there is somewhat similar to that. A lot of people use arrows. So I thought, well, we could probably revisit that quicksort and do it a little bit better. And I did not invent that definition. I found it one time and found it pretty nice. So I thought we could just go for it. All right. So let's do a functional quicksort, and it takes a list as a parameter. And if the list is empty, so we return an empty list if, well, we could do return list if list dot length is smaller or equal to 1. Does that make sense? If there's no elements, then the list doesn't need to be sorted. If there's one element, the list doesn't need to be sorted. Otherwise, now here I'm going to take the first element of the list and all the rest of the elements of the list and assign them to variables. And in Ruby, you can do that. This, head, comma, a little star, tail, equals list. Right? Because in Ruby, you can kind of have multiple return values. If I didn't put that little star here, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, but I think I would have head as the first element of the list and tail as a second, and then the rest of the list would be ignored, right? But I want the rest of the list to be and tail here will be an array. And now, what I want to do, I want all the smaller elements, which would be a list, plus the head, which is my pivot, plus all the larger elements of the list. So let's compute that. How do I get all the smaller elements than the pivot? I can do, and it has to be a functional recursive call, so I do func quicksort. And then I'll do the tail dot select. And then I'm going to select all the elements that are smaller than the head. And then for larger, I'll do the quicksort, tail dot select. And then I'll get all the elements that are greater or equal to the head. And that should be my quicksort. So I could do, notice, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Dot shuffle. Dot, I want to do a quicksort on that. Func quicksort, this, and then dot inspect. I don't care about how many parentheses I have. Right, and I should get 1 to 9 as a list as a result of this. So that's quicksort in a functional way, which I think is a lot easier to read, a lot smaller, and there's less chance of having bugs. I don't have to maintain indexes, I don't have to maintain empty lists or temporary values, all these things that you've been working for too long and you mess up something and it won't show until the millionth iteration or call to your quicksort function. I think this is a really nice quicksort. One thing that's interesting about this quicksort, it'll work on anything as long as that, the element, it will work on the list of anything as long as these elements respond to the smaller than and the greater or equal than methods. So if you use duck typing, anything you put in there, as long as it has smaller than or greater and equal to, the quicksort will work on them. And that's how you essentially reuse functions over a wide array of different types of data types. So Jim Weirich, the creator of RAID, I saw a talk from him one time when I was researching solid principles, and he was talking about inversion of control, not even the dependency inversion. He's like, you don't have dependency inversion in Ruby because there's no interface. But instead, what we can do is have this notion, We'll talk at the break. So instead, what you could do is having this notion of a policy. And I thought that was a neat idea. So what would a policy be? Well, you could have this thing that's this object, and you say this object is orderable. I can order it. And the policy is that I have smaller, greater, equal, smaller or equal, greater or equal on all my elements that are orderable. And then whenever you say, all right, I have this weird object is orderable, and your policy, you put it in your test file. So, well, this object is orderable, so you make sure that the greater, smaller, greater or equal, all of these operators work. That way, if your object one day is not orderable anymore, at least your test will break. Now you have this orderable object, and I could say, well, I have this quicksort method here, and it works. It's guaranteed to work if your object is orderable. Now, so the policy is that give me something that's orderable, and I'll be able to work. So you have policies on functions and what type of arguments they expect, and then you have policies on the actual objects themselves that say, well, this is a stack. It responds to push and pop. And it does so following certain laws that regulate stacks in general. Like if you put something on an empty stack, and there's only one element in the stack, and that's it. So all of those things are things you can double check in your tests. So I thought, well, what if I wanted to quicksort some kind of weird object? And this is one case where time is flying by, and I might just start copy-pasting code. I already have this orderable module here, so let me just copy-paste it. So I'll keep that func quicksort in here. I'll remove a couple of lines so that we can see what's going on. All right, so module orderable can be included on orderable objects. Why did I do that? Because all these methods call this compare method here. So as long as the object has a compare method where it compares itself to a different object, returns -1, 0, or +1, depending on how they compare. Now, go over here. I have this weird class. The weird class doesn't have much going on for it, except that it's weird. This one, so a weird is a value object, an immutable object that has an A and a B. And I reopen the class, include the orderable. The orderable needs the compare method. And I'm just going to compare the A's of both values. If A is smaller than the other A, then -1. If A is greater than the other A, then 1, else 0. Now I can call quicksort on the list of weird. So I have weird.new 11, weird.new 22, 31, 42, and I only care about the first parameter, right? So it should return the list in the same order if I do a quicksort on it. So I'll do my same thing, puts, shuffle, spec. And when I call it, I'm missing an end.
I forgot it for a minute.
At the end? Do I have too many parameters?
You can use P instead of puts.
I'm sorry?
You can use P instead of puts.
Just P itself?
And you don't have to add the inspect at the end.
That's good news. Still have this missing end.
I think another parenthesis after 4 too.
Where is that parenthesis? Why? Yeah. All right, let's do something. I'm going to recopy this line. This will not print out anything, but at least, nope, that's not the problem.
What line?
Oh, it's probably in here somewhere. Yeah. I knew I was doing something wrong. All right. P. Oh, well, that's because it's copy paste, right? There we go. So now I have this weird, and they're back in order. All the A's is 1, 2, 3, 4. That's just to demonstrate that you can have a bunch of different data types and pass them to that same function. And that same function is guaranteed to work as long as there's a certain behavior attached to your object. Let's skip this one part here. All right, so I'm gonna need a glass of water.
Did you use Orderable instead of just using the standard library comparable so it was more obvious what you were doing?
Yeah, I was just writing stuff myself and not caring what was already out there. Yeah, I don't know how the comparable library works.
Comparable is a mix, and all you define is the spaceship operator. So less than equals greater than, that's the same as your compare method. It has the same thing. The only difference is if they're incomparable, you have to return nil instead of raising a type error, and then it works correctly across types.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, you could use that. That shows how unknowledgeable I was. And it's a good thing I'm not doing Ruby anymore.
Just blame it on the poor documentation for the standard library.
I'm blaming on all the books that didn't show me that method. All right. This next thing I want to talk about is interesting. And so everybody's knows that sometimes you get nil value backs and that you have to check for them, otherwise you'll have nil exceptions popping up and your program just stops working. And one way to go around the nil exception issue is to have a data structure that has it baked in, that you can have this computation that may return something or it'll return nothing. And based on that data structure, you can stop caring about nil values. And that's the next thing I would like to go into. And that's the part I didn't get to practice with my coworkers because I ran out of time. So you guys are my test group today. Here's what I thought I could do. Let's bring in a few things first. See, I'm skipping all this for you guys. All right. I have orders. I have customers. So an order is a immutable object that has a total, and a customer is an immutable object that has an order and an address. And yeah, you see that I have these maybes in here, and I'll explain what they mean. That means I have to put in the maybe in here. But what I want to be able to do is, let's say I have this function called getCustomer, right? And getCustomer returns maybe nothing. You know, it fails. It returns, or maybe it returns a new customer. But whatever it returns, I want to be able to call order or address on it. So I want to be able to do put order.customer whether or not the customer exists. I'd like to do that, right? If customer is nothing, then I call order and it just returns something, but it doesn't blow up. And that's what the maybe data structure is useful for. So in this case, I have a class customer. I have this order function in there. That's my accessor that I'm monkey patching here. And I'm returning order inside that maybe, and I'm returning the address inside that maybe. So now I need to bring in the maybe. The other file. See all that code we're scanning? It's more time for beer later. All right, I'm just going to go over here. Okay. So I have this maybe. Don't worry about this policy thing. I was just trying to be consistent with my comments. A maybe is nothing if its value is nil. And then I have this kind of fmap function on it that when called, it returns nothing.new if nothing. So basically I'm missing this class nothing, which inherits from maybe. And how did I code it? It's not far. It's very simple. Okay. Pass nothing inherits from maybe, and in the initialize I just call super with nil in it so that the value will be nil. fmap. So my data structure has a value or not in it, and when I call fmap, I'm basically passing a function to the maybe, and it's going to execute that function using the value inside the maybe as a parameter. But if the maybe is nothing, it'll just return nothing. If the maybe is something, it'll call the function with something on it. So let's do a few examples.
When you say nothing, you say nil?
Q means the nothing object.
Yeah, the nothing
Okay.
object in this case. Let's first see if this, yeah, this still builds. It still runs, so it didn't make a copy paste error here. So, for example, I can have maybe .new 1, right? So that would wrap 1 inside a maybe object, and then I can call fmap, and I have this element in there, right? And I want to do plus 5. So let's see what that does. Interesting, it returns 6 inside a maybe. So fmap applied the function to the element inside my maybe, took the value and put it in another maybe, which means I can chain them, right? I could call fmap and keep going that way if I wanted to. So what if I try with nothing? And the second one is a nothing. It didn't do anything with it. So that's interesting. So now I have functions I can apply to values that are potentially not nil, but nothing. And that's the first step. Again, apologies for not practicing this. This far. You can't do a whole lot of stuff with that. I mean, you could do a bunch of active. I mean, if active record returned maybes, for example, right, and you do customer.find by email and pass in an email address, and that it doesn't exist, so it returns nothing. But what you wanted to do is send an email. Well, I could do something like ar.find by email, whatever it is, and then map, and then here's my function that I want to use. Here's my customer, and let's email that customer. Doesn't matter what the function implementation is. I don't care if that customer exists or not. If it doesn't exist, the function won't be called. If it exists, it will be called. I don't have to check anything. So because fmap exists on maybe, you can call maybe a functor. That's a technical term. You'll probably hear it once or twice more in your life. I'll try not to say it again tonight because otherwise that'll come true. And there's a little bit more to the maybe, right? It's also something that's an applicative. So let me add more code here to our little maybe and see where we can go with that. Did I lose anyone so far? So far, it's fairly understandable. Is this all new to pretty much everybody? Is there anybody in the room that has heard about the maybe before, or functors? So, a couple of people. That's what's so interesting about this, and that's what makes it hard to get into, because everything is different. It's a completely different paradigm. It's a completely different way to code, and I find that fascinating. Anyway. I have this new function here. It's a class function. If I do maybe.pure, pass in a value, it'll wrap it. It'll wrap that value into a maybe. If I use apply, apply is a little different. Does anybody know what querying is?
Create a function that wraps, so some of the arguments are already filled in for you later on.
You take when you query a function, let's say you have a function that takes 2 parameters. It'll create a function that takes 1 parameter and returns a function that takes another parameter. And then when you call the second one, it'll finally do the operation. I knew I would need this. Nola, is the camera going to catch this too?
Let me check.
Or is just going for that?
I'm ahead and on to see what it looks like.
And the reason I want to write it is I don't know how I would write it in Ruby.
You can move it over.
So I move it a little bit. All right. So if I have this method called add, and add takes an x and an y, and it returns x plus y. That's fairly simple. If I query this, I'll end up, let's call it add 1. Add 1 takes an x, and it returns, I'm going to use the Ruby lambda notation here. It returns a function that takes a y and returns x plus y. Right, so if I call add 1, so if I do b equals add 1, 5, b, what is b? If b is a function. If I do b, 5, I'll get 10. Does that make sense to everyone? So that's querying. You take a function with multiple parameters and transform them into functions that return functions that return function once, one for every parameter. And only after you've had every parameter filled in will the function finally execute. Apply in the maybe works a little bit like that. I may have a function that takes a few parameters, and those parameters are all going to be maybes, right? And it's going to either execute. If all those parameters are something, it's going to execute. If just one of them is nothing, it will not execute. So inside our function apply here, it returns nothing, first of all, if the current maybe is nothing. It's already a failed computation, so we're not going to keep going. It also returns nothing if the element I'm trying to apply to it is nothing. Otherwise, now we have our little fmap here. I call fmap on it, and I have this, the current value in the maybe is the function we're trying to apply. It's queried, I apply it to the element. So let's see if I can show you an example and maybe make this a little evident what's going on. Let's see. So I have a class shipper, and I want to be able to ship an order to a certain address. Here I have a customer where, and let me just make sure everything adds up. All right, a customer where the order is nil and the address is nil. I'm curious why I put a nil in there. So I was supposed to give this talk in September, Nola and Mando. So I wrote most of this code in August. And I knew it really well back then, and this is way too big. I apologize for that. Let me just see first if this runs. We might go to the break earlier then. Yes. All right. I just put it in front of that. So before I can use a function and pass it parameters that are maybes, I have to put that function inside a maybe as well. This is just the way it is. You can't take it for granted. So I'm going to have this function here that takes an address, takes an order, and then it calls shipper.ship address order. And then I call apply with the first parameter, and the first parameter is customer.address. And the second parameter is customer.order. That's why I put nil in here. Because order here returns a maybe new of nil, which is a nothing. Anyway, could have written this better. So nothing happens. I tried to ship an order to a customer, but nothing happened. But it didn't bump. I mean, it didn't get any kind of error. Let's try the same thing here with a customer that has an order, but no address. Get another nothing. All right, let's try another order. The order has a total. Address. Oh, I have this little output ship order to home. So now that my objects are not failed computations, the program is allowed to continue and execute. So far so good? You guys understand? It's getting a little bit more complicated. Yes?
So what's the advantage of currying? How does it affect function stack?
Currying?
Yeah.
So here's what happens when I try to use a maybe. Let's say I have this method add. And add takes two parameters, x and y, and it's going to add them, right? X plus y. Now, instead of having an x and a y as normal integers, what I have is just one, or a maybe 1 and a maybe 2. So the result should be maybe 3. So when I call apply, it'll apply the first parameter. So let's say I take my add and I put it inside a maybe. Okay? And then I have this x here, which is a maybe 1. What it does is it takes this value and applies it to add, but add takes two parameters. So normally this would fail. But we call curry on this. So now add is a curry function that takes one parameter. The result of this now is a maybe with add 1 inside of it. Add 1 is a function that takes a number and we'll add 1 to it because I put in 1. If I had put 5 here, then it would be a 5 here. Does that make sense?
So you say that the primary advantage is just the reusability of your initial arguments that you pass on.
Of this whole thing?
Just for this example.
The advantage of what?
What's the advantage of currying that value?
Yeah, it's the only way. You can't, because you have to apply these arguments one at a time. Because you want to check for nothing on each one of them. So as you go through all of them, you apply them. But if add took 2 parameters, you'd get an exception in Ruby saying you passed in 1 parameter when 2 are expected. So you have to curry it.
So what's the advantage of throwing an exception? Why don't you just throw an exception?
Well, because in this case, you want to apply all the arguments. You don't want to, this whole thing, you wouldn't be able to use this whole pattern if currying wasn't possible.
So if you look at it in this example, think about it on Amazon. You're going to pick a bunch of packages that will ship to the same address. You can curry the address part of the thing and then iterate with that function over all orders you want to ship to that address, so that you only have one thing to pass all the functions instead of like this bundle of arguments or this hash of options to pass down. You just have that one partially applied function that's been curried to pass down, and so there's less to think about. Like your API doesn't have to expand to all these options and all these positional arguments, which makes maintaining the API really hard.
That's an example. Yeah, I was trying to explain it only in this context. Another example in our program, you know, we launch our program, and then we have a bunch of functions that expect a database connection for the whole thing to work. So what we do is we partially apply the database connection, and then we just reuse that function and pass in whatever we need to do with that. But because the database connection has already been applied to the function, we don't need to do it again.
Did you avoid the having to use the thread local cache of the active record database, or are you not using active record in this case?
I'm not using it.
Oh, because this is all in actual Haskell.
Yeah, I mean, that could be probably a doctorate thesis, right? How to use active record and functional programming at the same time. All right, and now we would have our second argument, and maybe this time it's a maybe 2, right? And now instead of applying it to this, we apply it to that, right? So at each one of these tests, if this is nothing, the whole thing returns nothing. If this is nothing, the whole thing returns nothing. If this is nothing, the whole thing returns nothing. But if there's something, then finally this will return a 3. So this allows you to call functions with multiple parameters, each one of which may fail. Let's say you're building a customer, and you get data from a bunch of different computations for that customer, and one of them fails. Well, you don't want to build a customer, so you get nothing as a result. All right, I'm going to go a little deeper than that. Let's see if we can do this. That's going to be the last thing I say before the break. All right, I'm going to bring in this class here called account. The account class is just like the shipper class. It's a service class. I use it to charge customers money, right? So I call charge with an amount, and customer was charged this amount. Doesn't matter which customer, I guess, in this case. So applicative was interesting. It's more powerful than functors because fmap only takes one parameter. Applicative allows you, apply allows you to chain a lot of parameters together. But there's nothing in there that allows you to change the behavior based on previous values. So what I want to do now, I'm going to write this way first. I would like to do this. I have maybe a customer, and I call pass, and pass takes a function that gives me that customer. That customer maybe has an address. So I'm going to call pass on it and get the address. And that customer may have an order. I'm going to call pass on that and get the order. Now I have customer, address, and order that I can use. And now I output to the screen, ready to charge. I calculate a discount if the total of the order is more than 100. And then I call account.charge, and then I add in the discount. And then there's this maybe pure that you'll remember, simply builds a maybe and puts the value inside of it. So I return a maybe. The reason why is that you may want to keep chaining stuff. So now I need this pass method, right? Let's go fetch it real quick. I got it right here. It's not too complicated. Let me go add it back to the maybe up here. All right, pass takes a function. It returns nothing if the current value is nothing. That's the same thing as the apply method above. Otherwise, we're just going to call the function and pass in our value to it. All right, now I need to define maybe customer. Well, let's start easy. Maybe customer equals nothing, W. So I'm not expecting to see a ready to charge here. Nothing happened. All right. Let's take this one over here. So now I have a customer that has an order and a home inside a maybe. Now we charge the customer $123. The discount was not applied, it looks like. Oh well, I'll figure this out later. If it's 50 over here, we should see. Oh, the discount. Oh, if it's smaller, that's stupid. You want to apply a discount if the order is more than something. Isn't that what I had? If the order total is greater than 100,
then your zeros are
oh,
applied.
there we go.
Yeah.
That's better. All right, let's do the 1, 2, 3 again. Should be 113. Yeah. All right, let's say this customer doesn't have a home. Nothing happens. Let's say this customer has a home, but no order. I can't ship no order to a customer. So that customer has to have an order and a home for the whole thing to work. Now let's rewrite that another way, and we can end on that. What I'm going to write here is the same thing, except charge customer here is a lambda expression. It's a function that takes maybe a customer and just calls pass, pass, pass. Exactly the same thing that I've done.
Your ternary is still inverted. The correction.
Your discount.
Oh yeah. Right. Okay, now it's exactly the same thing. Thank you. And now I have this function I can pass around. That's basically, instead of calling it directly, I can call it later. It's a later point. Pass it around. I have this maybe customer. Charge him twice. You could call charge customer a little DSL, a little program that you can pass around, and then you compute some values, you pass them to your programs, and it does computations for you, which you may be happy about. So now that we have pass inside this maybe, your maybe is now called a monad. And that's the dreaded M word I was trying not to show anybody or mention it until the end, because when you say monad, people, la la la, they just block their ears and go away and they don't want to hear anything else. It simply allows you to chain computations together, and having computations depend on previous values. So you see in this case, I calculate a discount based on the order amount. And the rest is taken care of by the same thing as apply that we used earlier. If the customer doesn't exist, if the address doesn't exist, the order doesn't exist, nothing happens. Otherwise, something happens. And so hopefully you guys got a little bit interested in functional programming and in these type of data structures. Like, there's a ton more than just maybe. Maybe is the easiest one to start talking about, to explain, because it's simple. But there's nothing that tells us here why the computation failed. It just tells you nothing. So there's other monads that encapsulate these errors, right? There's the either monad, for example, which is either left or right, where the left value is usually used as an error value. So if you would call, remember when we did, let me find the maybe over here, fmap, we would return nothing if it's nothing. Well, if it was an either, we'd return left if it was left. Otherwise, we'd yield the value. Anyway, so there's a couple of other ways. And there's also data structures that accumulate errors, right? So the nice benefit of being able to chain everything is in some cases you can have a bunch of errors, have them accumulate, and return them all to the user instead of bumming out on the first one or creating these extra infrastructure to be able to accumulate multiple errors. Like, you get something from the front end, you want to build a new customer, and they pass you a first name and last name, and you have to check if they'll fit in the database, for example. You only have 256 characters. You check for that, and if it fails, you just return the either and with that error message. But that doesn't prevent you from checking the last name as well. let the error message accumulate. But the whole thing at that point is a fail computation. And even if you try to say, if you have a function at the end that you fmap over it and say save this to the database, the function will never get called. So it's a lot of different paradigms. And I would encourage you to, if you want to learn that style of functional programming, Scala is very accessible to learn that. There's books called Functional Programming in Scala, which is really, really good. That's it.
Any other questions?
Are you gonna put the code somewhere?
I should. Yeah, I should. I'll put it in one file and then put it up on GitHub, and I'll.
We'll tweet it out.
Cool.
All right. Take 5 minutes. There's water. Let me get into the hallway. The rest of you come back for our programming kata.
And if you're hiring or looking or you want to come on a Golden Gate Ruby conference by Tony Stewart, because like your talks are super similar.
Everything I've done here is nothing new, so it was surprising.
Tom Stewart, so if you look on YouTube for Golden Gate Ruby conference, it's refactoring Ruby's monads or something.
Oh, I saw his blog post.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool because like the way he phrases it is he dodges around like monad, functor, and applicant, and like he does all the stuff because instead of doing what does he do? Instead of doing like return and bind, he just calls it and then.
Yeah.
And like so he builds it up without using the scary terminology.
It comes from the Scala, because I also saw flat map from there. Flat map is the Scala thing.
Yeah. Flat map for me though, because Ruby has flat map and it means something different.
What does it mean?
So it means instead of having an array of arrays, you can cast them all together.
That makes sense, actually. But like, yeah.
So flat map is really useful if you want to get a single object or arrays, and you can flat map enough from there.
Computations that's maybe something, right? And it's a little too much, and you kind of join them and get them.
It seems to be maybe like one big problem like it fails silently. Not necessarily. But like what is the advantage of doing doing it like 10 years like makes a lot of fail loudly without writing it in failure. Yes. And that's why I was like thinking like program in Ruby, but I've got into it a little bit. It'd be cooler if I just did it, bland and then getting a little like.
That's why I started by saying
That gets the question I
you have to write it in failure cases. You have to.
You don't have tail recursion unless you found a special option. You have tail recursion Ruby, so you can't. Most functional programming is also tail recursive, so like the last call gets pushed into the same stack frame, so you don't blow your stack, and so then
And like if I recall correctly, Ruby is to specify it's single threaded. It's just like single threaded.
background of PHP framework.
So MRI is different in the sense that you can give itself some more kind of code, but sleep zones
But like you have to be, but, I mean, yes, but like you have to like specify. In most cases, most use cases, it's going to be credit unless you learn very like. Am I wrong?
Even Haskell doesn't cover very much, right? You just have PMAP. You're not going to get free implementation.
That's true. But that's true. Okay.
Sorry. I mean, you can JRuby or
LC.
Yeah.
But there's startup types. So much. I would turn off Simple Hub today, and I would
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was.
I can't use coverage. How would I
Sorry to say, but I was no, I was IT recruiter for K-Force, so we did do direct space, but it was mainly on
Okay, I haven't messed with that.
Yeah,
Obviously.
it was interesting. It's a very saturated market.
Sorry, go ahead.
On job.
Subject.
Side.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I don't know. I've been doing Java at work last week, and then in the last month, like in the middle of JavaScript.
So it's like, yeah, we need a Java architect who's like 3 to 5 years. I was like, okay.
Yes.
No, but it's like, Java with 3 to 5 years of like architecting Java applications. I also want them to have experience with mobile and then Scala and and 1,000 max 100K. And I'm just like,
yeah, I functional programming.
No, but it's Cisco. It's fine. I'm just like, yeah. I was like, dude, no one's gonna do that.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I've heard about it.
Like Cisco.
I bookmarked it. I'm waiting for the on-race videos to come out. Like, are they?
And every single time they're like, it's Cisco.
It's on my it's on my radar of things I need to do. Yeah, it's on my radar of things to do, but it's not like high on the list. So it's like, should I move it up higher?
Yeah, why did you not do anything? Still get paid on it as a kid. It's like, I wanted to, it's like, I just want to find something. It's like, do what you say.
Oh my god.
You'll get a money grab.
Seriously, but, okay, Is that kind of like
we just finishing up the business plan right now. But doing that and pitch deck and stuff, getting all like the projections together.
I don't know. I'm just of the opinion people should try it. Like there's I find this paradigm, especially when you're like, oh my god, it's self-documented. Go talk to yourself, you're not writing Java.
No, I mean for the idea, there's like more competitors in the market, and we were like crushing the numbers.
Yeah. Really?
So it's basically a place for gaming communities to host all their content,
Fuck
like
you.
websites.
Fuck you. That is not production code. Yeah. I mean,
you could do screenshots and videos.
Do you ever just do like single programmer projects? Do you just do agency work? What is wrong with you? Like this is not like I get so bad. It's just like not scalable. You have to document, especially if it's statically typed. Even with statically typed, like I see why so many random enterprise places use things like Java because it's just like obviously documented.
I saw you at the thing earlier today.
It's like oh
yeah,
put it
and I talked to
puts on the
yes. I was like,
yeah.
top
Buddy,
two.
that's great. But I'm Catherine.
Yeah, I like the admin person.
And anyways, I gave him my resume. I'm just gonna pass out my card.
So we do the basic hosting and then just choose what game you are. That'll be like.
I get so irritated with that, especially if dynamically typed programmers.
You customize the website.
There's a reason statically typed exists. There's a reason to write enterprise software and use statically typed like it's because the rest of you suck and write bad code. Anyway, so my opinion is I haven't done through games. I need to write it
That would be a really complex API, and you could be like,
anyway,
here's the name, and then it would be like, oh, here's the name for like every single one of these games. Yeah, because it's like, or it's like you have a very common name for like what you play more in each game, so you just sit there and it's like, oh, this is what the name is on like 1,200 different WoW servers, and like, oh, so it's like, you wouldn't really want that. So each module is specific to that game.
Really? Yeah. That's actually really neat.
But yeah, doing
I don't know, that's my other like hobby.
server hosting, tournament brackets. We're eventually gonna do something with like Steam, where they have like a chat window where you can have like, obviously it's not gonna load games because what Steam does, but you'll be able to have your profile and show what your top games are. And, so that's what we're looking at, but at the most basic level, it's just like
I don't have
admin of a guild or clan or something. They'll start up this gaming community. They'll be able to do post the forum. They'll be able to sign up for raids. They'll be able to.
Also, hi, Bonnie.
Yeah.
What do you guys do? Tell me what sort of project you're working on. Maybe I'll be tempted. I feel like I've heard of it. Yeah. I know enough people in like the hacker sort of space, and that is something that is very awesome.
Especially like when you're on your phone, it's like how can you be playing League of Legends on your phone now? And someone's like, hey, I want to go to this 40-man raid tonight. I'm doing it at this time. Yeah, and then someone's like at work, like, I'm down.
Yeah, that's actually kind of awesome. But like it's all that shit that's been on the bucket and no one's ever gonna see it ever.
Funding in the next month. Because all the funding cycles are ending. The funding cycles are ending in like a month and a half. A lot of the VCs for here, they're having office hours on Wednesday. So we're just trying to get. Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons why we're here.
That's true.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I guess that makes sense in this context. Like, did they just fix that so you can have it every time?
Architects, investors if possible. We're going to start doing by the new year. And have it out by July. Voice server out by September.
I don't know though, like if I work as a female developer at a company that works on Pakistan, am I gonna get doxxed? Just saying. Like, let's be real here.
So it's like an average person would be spending about $20 per month doing the hosting.
Yeah, I'm aware of this.
Comes with between 10 and 20.
I mean, I'm aware of this. I have been on the fringes of this shit for years.
And then you can
and like, I would probably, if I worked at a company that did this, I would probably clear my identity and stuff.
Will be paying like $100. So you get like 5,000.
Have several layers of identity because.
5,000 subscribers, you get $150
yeah, she's trying to develop.
So we're looking to get 60,000 by the end of the year.
I'm just saying, this is a known phenomena in this sort of space.
One of the newer companies that just launched in 2009.
But it's okay. That's something else.
3 years. They had.
I think we can do something.
So, where's that exactly?
In the offshoots, it was
12,000 members, and that's like half what we'll probably get. So we're just showing that technical thing. Everyone sends them finance projections and they're like, yeah, well, this is gonna make takes like, we're not gonna make $5 million, but conservatively we'll be making a month by the end of the month. Are you conservatively, it's like, well, it'll probably be double that, so help us and get this going.
You know what I was saying about setup?
I mean, last time was really not down to get in the game anymore. But then after that, he would be like, no, I don't want to.
Who's interested in the kata stuff?
I'll do a kata.
Just,
I don't know what it is, but I'm just
being specific.
All right. So let's go ahead and pair up. Hey, let's go ahead and pair up with people who are interested in pairing on this stuff.
Oh, GitHub jobs. I was thinking like
take seats either the tables up front or the tables in the back.
Stack over.
So this is quickly. You said you were looking for
yeah, we can talk afterwards. Good question. So, can I have a show of hands for the folks who are going to be pairing up on stuff? All right, if you are not going to be pairing up on stuff, if you could step out into the lobby over there, so that we could go ahead and get started without interruption, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, charge my words.
So a code kata is just something that we're going to be, it's meant to be as a practice, as an exercise, like a programming exercise, something that should be done, that can be done quick and easy. And we're also going to practice pairing, right? So if you've never paired, like pair program with someone before, this is a good chance to get that kind of experience under your belt. So tonight's code kata is going to be very simple. Usually we have it up on the projector, right? But this one is actually so simple I can just describe it in one sentence, right? What we're going to do is we're going to implement string.reverse, but we can't use .reverse, right? So given a string, it should print out the reverse of that string with capitalization or whatever intact, right? Capitalization, punctuation, whatever you want, right? And it should be a method on string, so type, quote, THIS, close quote, dot reverse, or new, whatever, a reverse, right? And it'll print out exactly what reverse is. And your single one test will be to assert that your reverse equals Ruby's string reverse, right? So given any string, call dot a reverse or underscore reverse, right, should output whatever string dot reverse would look like.
So we have to duplicate all the Unicode errors they have in the real one?
And if you want to, feel free. Go right ahead. Yeah, you can try it with Big 5 stuff too. That's almost as fun as the Unicode reverses. Pick a partner. If you've ever worked with someone here, I don't think most folks have, try to pick someone that you haven't worked with in the past. We try to kind of mix it up as much as we can. Sure. And then grab a spot at any of the tables or the tables in the back. And yeah, we'll take something like this is pretty quick. Takes 15-20 minutes just to go through. And yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. What did I miss, Nola?
Well, it doesn't matter. I can just show you some next time.
Learn this stuff. It's pretty awesome. What are you doing?
I'm a senior engineer. Most of the open source gems are like framework.
Really?
Not just all the code, some it's like explain how to the code, but the whole like community best practices enforcement and like code structure and like the fact that we use Yarn now and of course RSpec on the open source stuff. That was all my initiative.
Jeez, so you're a bit high up there.
Well, I can tell you I am the junior developer at Mr. Livery.
So Mr. Delivery is like one of the competing shipping places here, or is it local delivery?
Food delivery.
Food delivery.
We're in about 18 different cities. We're on top of about 3,000 different.
So you're competing with like Amazon's delivery, and like Google has a food delivery thing too.
Yeah. We're actually a restaurant delivery service. So, we're a third party. We work with the restaurants, the franchise.
Yeah.
Pretty much Google or Seamless, Grubhub, 24, tons of portals come to us with their orders. Yeah, so we have to, we're working on the fact that Grubhub sends us just PDFs. Whereas 24 don't have great APIs. So we're trying to especially like vendors who know nothing. Awesome. Absolutely nothing about anything related to.
You know, Apache has a library for like manipulating PDFs, but I want to say it's backed by Java, so you'd have to drop in a JRuby if you were doing it in Ruby.
I'm pretty sure we're using something else. Some other.
Yeah, because I want to say the library's called Prawn or something like that. Well, that might be PDF. That might be the PDF maker. I don't remember if it reads PDFs made by Adobe.
Yeah, we have something we've been using. So the Grubhub, the PDF problem actually is fine. I have to actually talk to them right now what the real problem is, but we just exploded. That's why we hate our developers so far. So, I'm gonna bring my stuff up. It's gonna die.
So we're going to do string reverse.
Okay, so starting at 9 a.m. to 4.
It's functional.
Functional side?
See? It was functionally.
Which tests?
I don't need a test, it's functional. It's mathematics.
Yeah, started a class on that. If you just want to do it, watch.
No, that's what you want to do.
I guess you just take that.
Okay, so
Oh, and then
if we don't reverse, we have the bytes. So we need all the bytes.
So this way to practice coding. But it's on Ruby. It's pair programming.
I think.
It's tough.
Yeah, beautiful. So we'll do Jerry get some spot.
That's why I wanted to do live coding. Can you just do
right.
Reverse.
Well,
Reverse it. Get reverse. Right. So we're gonna do that. So some of the methods do that. So we'll start.
Google Groups and only
we can aggregate this. So we have
Okay. So we got percent, but that's a formatter. We got a multiplier. We can do array lookups.
I was just like, that's my turn.
We can export bytes directly. Slice the bytes. In the index, so which one do we want to use?
Some beginning stuff.
I'm just letting you know.
There's a page for getting started.
So let's try it out. So if we do slice,
So was doing there's this one professor that
Oh, you're right.
Just slicing works the same as I guess array. There's number lookup. It's a difference.
But anyway, I had to cheat with something with the answer. And so we could do S. I couldn't believe it. I actually took a piece of paper and traced down all the results.
Yeah, I mean, that's create a loop that starts with the last value of the array and then this one through.
But then that's not like,
Oh yeah, it was just, you know, max of the list, right?
Last element max of the string.
Yeah. Find the max. Give it.
And then you can do S. That reverse, and you would get the rest of the string.
Generate case. When you know, it's the generate case and then max of this, you know, of the rest of the list plus what you just have, you know. That's all it is.
But recursive containers in Ruby, so because it has a stack just like C++, C or C++ does. If you go too many recursive calls, you'll run on a stack.
Think about that. Which do you look at?
It's a bit easier on Ruby if you end up using like event machine, because event machine, the way that works is it uses fibers, and the fibers have a very clean stack, like 4 kilobytes, which isn't that much space. Like since we're redefining reverse right here, we can just say we're going to take the end and just do the rest, reverse, and that would work. So we try it.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
no, this is not okay. This is strange. Oh yeah, this is strange. This would be like a basic study. No. But we make it work.
So you draw practicing functional programming.
Practice with us.
Well, actually, it's this
So basically, we have
oh, right. I didn't do
yeah.
So if I could in Windows, I have a virtual box or something.
And yeah, it starts with
yeah, so that means exclude the end. Although this still is probably recursive because the problem is we don't handle the hey, you're empty. So empty. Oh, so empty. So that's, because any recursive function you always have to have like the simplest case.
Yeah.
In our case, the simple case is we have nothing.
If we don't have any conversion,
I thought he was using tabs for the spacing on this. That's so weird.
Yeah.
So that works. That's recursive, and assuming our string isn't too big, that will always work.
So we can swap the header and tail and then the pointer in, right?
not the Ruby
Yes, so if you want to see the actual source for that, that's probably an iterative function because it'll be written in
So this is no. So let's just say
plus.
So we're on house implement and 193 anyway. CLB string. String.c.
String. Nice.
So yeah, they just use pointer math to make it really fast and see.
Yeah.
And then they have a couple. Well, they have some special handling to make it fast. So like, this probably checks if the string is single byte, and so this checks it so it handles Unicode better. Yeah, because multi-byte sealing, so this is encoding aware, and it probably doesn't handle outside Unicode because Ruby handles not just Unicode for 4 languages, but a couple of the older character sets. So if you there's an ink folder, and so all these old style pre-Unicode encodings happen. So like there's a couple Koreans, a couple Japanese. Some of these ISOs are like weird ones from Europe that Windows supports. There's an actual window one there. Yeah. Oh, and the different forms of UTF. So like most Unix is used UTF-8, but like there's all the 16s. So there's 16 mixed 32s, 16 big endian, little endian, and 32s, which you actually need to talk on Windows, because Windows, unlike Linux, doesn't use UTF-8. It uses UTF-16 or UTF-32, and so when they say wide-char or W-char in the Windows, in like actual like Microsoft Windows code, that means UTF-16. Oh, okay. So if you actually look at the code, so UTF-8 is still ASCII compatible, so there's never a null byte, because null means the end of a string in C. So, but UTF-16 is every other byte is a 0 because they're too wide, and so most of your ASCII characters only fill in the low byte. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, this, I'm trying to think of an example where Ruby Unicode handling works.
Where one itself is a string itself. So basically,
there's errors.
In our case,
I know that if you do charge, take the string, it makes it too.
There's problems with Unicode handling. I'm trying to think about, like, there's certain characters that'll fuck it up.
I mean, this is a string. This one is self in this context. Just go back if the next equals 1. Otherwise,
so like one of the things is like, it's hard to tell. So this is called a grapheme. But in Unicode, 2 code points can make that. So like some of the accents can actually type as like O and then accent, and so the code points are actually next to each other. But like your like terminal or your browser has to know to combine those into one grapheme. And so, as far as I know, the code points API will just do like this O with the dots could either be a single Unicode character or it could be O and the dots. And there's no way to be like, Ruby, tell me what you're actually going to render. Ruby doesn't have that concept right now. Some other languages do, but like there's no graphemes, which is what this would be called. So like no matter what, this grapheme, you'd always get back no matter whether the user typed O followed by the accent or O with the accent. So when you get code points, this could be represented two different ways, potentially.
Gotcha. Erased.
And so if you actually had a handle for languages, you have to do Unicode normalization to handle that.
When is it started at the tail of the last character?
No, it's not the last.
How's everybody coming?
And then you take the rest.
Need more time? Or are you guys done?
Take the rest of it.
Can you put up the quick sort code?
Yeah, sure.
So we're doing puts with this string.
Bonnie, how you guys doing? You guys working?
Interpolations.
You guys good?
Inject this code by calling to-us on it. So we're just gonna.
Louis, do you mind?
And this is a literal.
Let's bring up the quick sort code real quick.
We're gonna interpolate this again. So we're gonna do.
Yes, please.
You want to take quick sort?
Bar.reverse and then two string that, and so that's how we got the message that foodbar. Reverse. So actually, if we want to render it so it looks a little. So if you look at that.
Actually, this will.
So that doesn't really look right because they're not code strings. So we want to do code strings.
Be like that.
We want to do code strings instead.
So then we have that. And next time first one.
All right. So who wants to share their
We can use inspect to get a implementation the string for us, so they look more.
There's only 3 groups we can show all of them off real quick. If we want. You guys have one that works? Yeah. All right. Why don't you go ahead and?
Yeah, so
sorry, Renu.
wrote in this Ruby code.
Disconnect.
I mean,
yeah. Go ahead and disconnect, and then you can connect to.
You have AirPlay?
If you connect to Capital Factory. Yeah. Go to Capital Factory. Louis, what's the password for the Capital Factory?
The guest one?
The guest is the factory.
The regular one.
Oh, it flips that.
But the same thing. Okay. Now go to. Should be there. There should be an AirPlay.
See, there's probably some ways to do it. So
where's the AirPlay thing? No, it should be there already.
I have no idea. Somebody set it up for me.
Yeah, it should have already shown up, right?
yeah, AirPlay just like shows up on your taskbar on
Yeah.
Macs if you can see it.
We can copy.
Okay. Yeah. Do you mind firing up, connecting back again?
Sure.
And then what?
And then just bring up a new file, and he'll just retype it.
Exit. Oh.
Very nice. So you want to talk through it real quick? Just explain how it works.
We use recursive functions. Use the same technique as him. Like in this case, we grab the head as an array, and grab the last character. So we do append that to the head, reverse it again.
Very cool.
There, that works.
Very nice.
What happens if you have an empty string?
Let's see.
Yep.
Oh,
it's because of the glob.
It's that length only checks for one character.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Nice. Gotcha. Yeah, this is why.
When you do recursion, you have to make sure your base case
is
pretty solid.
Yes. Bonnie, you guys want to show up yours real quick? Or is it basically the same?
My is pop.
Oh, nice.
We just stuck it, well, we just stuck it in an array and then pop, and then made that a new string.
Oh, go show it to us.
Okay. Stack pop?
Peace.
I think he needs to stay connected. So she can. Do you mind retyping it?
No, I don't mind at all. Yeah, I don't mind retyping it. And then I got halfway through and I was going, but.
Yeah, I remember. And then there's also one for Rails specifically.
Not my keyboard.
There's nothing worse than typing at someone else's computer.
Well, it's bad switching from like full depth keyboard to laptop keyboard. I had it in my last job and it was like, in the wrong keys on the laptop.
So, OS 10, I want to say Leopard? Leopard or maybe Lion had a bug where sometimes it would lose its mind when you went to sleep regarding the keyboard that you had chosen. And so my default keyboard was, US QWERTY, but my coworker used Dvorak. So whenever we would pair, we'd switch, right? And I always made sure that when we finished pairing, I would switch back to US QWERTY, right? But one time my laptop, and this would only happen, and it happened pretty reliably, when the laptop would like hard sleep, like it was sleeping and then ran all the way down, right? So that you opened up, you couldn't do anything until you charged it again. So plugged it in, and sure enough, when it came back, it thought it was in Dvorak. And I didn't know Dvorak, and I didn't have my phone with me or something like that. So I was like mapping the keys one by one to try to type
Was that before
them.
they had the keyboard select on the login screen?
I think that's why they added it, in fact. Okay, let's see the, you want to run us through the implementation?
Let's try with no. Oh, wait, good.
Yeah, basically we're turning the string into an array. We're doing, for each character in the string, we're stick it in an array, and then for the size of the array, pop the end off and make it part of the new string, and then return the new string. So basically cheating and making it an array.
It's not cheating.
It's not cheating. It's just easy.
Yeah. Interesting. Fantastic. You guys want to show up yours real quick?
I just like the first one, but I did think of another one using inject that I could show.
Okay.
No, it's not.
Do you have AirPlay on yours?
No, because I'm on the guest network.
It's funny, I thought the guest network had. Oh, well.
I think you have to be on the real one, on the Kappa Factory.
Stuck in there.
It always bugs me that inject is the opposite order of each with the object.
Yep.
So I always screw up the order for inject. It makes sense that when I think about it as like accumulator, but otherwise I'm like.
Nice.
Yeah, that works well.
Yeah. How do I get back to that?
Just output. Yeah. Go to the terminal, save it first, and go to terminal. Just run the last one. Good.
Yeah, and so that's non-recursive.
Oh, that's small. Jeez. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. So inject has the benefit of it's iterative without you having to do a loop on your own.
Right.
But a lot of people will question you using inject because inject is one of the more functional Ruby things that people might not be what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, instead of doing ACK plus C, you're doing C plus ACK.
Yeah.
That's a very smart way to do it. And I think, I mean, it's a very functional way for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the overhead of creating each string isn't that great, but it's probably just as bad at, like, the char string alone is probably not that efficient because I don't think Ruby can create the individual chars strings without allocating new strings anyway.
Yeah.
This is nice because if you don't, it'll work out.
So strings immutable in Ruby?
No, that's the problem.
Yeah.
See, you don't have to check for length in this case.
Right, because you start with the base case of empty string. Your accumulator has it.
Yeah.
Well done. That's good.
And just recently I saw that someone actually did performance metrics, and the symbol to proc is actually faster than the block form of all of the methods that accept the, like, where you can use symbol to proc and stuff.
Yeah. So that was a great talk at,
Yeah.
I think, Goruko. Who was it that gave it? Someone gave, there's a really good talk online.
It wasn't Goruko, because I don't think it was, because I watched, I thought it almost was that. That was somewhere else. Was Cascadia?
So it was, they didn't show the slide, or they didn't show the video, it was just the slides.
Oh, okay.
So I think it was at Goruko. But anyway, it was like, you know, everything you didn't know about, you know, what's fast and slow in Ruby or afraid to ask or something like that. And it was just like benchmarking stuff like that.
Yeah, so you I don't know, do we have any movies left for like Maker Square? Okay, so you may not have seen this in code before, but when you have like each, you can do ampersand and a symbol, and you'll run that method on the self that each is giving. And so that's faster than doing like an actual block and calling the method.
Right.
And so the way that ampersand works is it's part of the parser, and symbols just have this method called .to_proc define. So you can actually do that on other stuff, and it'll work too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used that a lot when I would have like an array of something, you know, and I wanted just the IDs of customers, for example. You do that map, and then %ID, and then it would just return a map of ID, a list of IDs for IDs. Yeah. So it's kind of nice to do that. What I like about your solution is that you're reusing, like a good thing in functional programming is reusing other methods or other functions because of the reuse that's important. And so just by reusing inject, I think you went as deep as you could possibly go into making this functional.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Cares does the like inversion of separated Unicode characters properly though.
Yeah, I don't know about that. That's a good question.
Because even code points wouldn't. I don't know if pairs are graphemes, because like the whole test is like, is O with umlauts treated the same as O followed by umlaut? Because those are two different Unicode representations of the same grapheme.
I went the recursive way like you guys did, except instead of using splat, I simply took the first character of the string and then tail, as you know, using the string as a range, and then calling my reverse of tail plus the head.
Why did -1 in the tail?
Because you can go negative. So if I go in IRB and I have this string, so you can do ranges, right? 0.2.
-1 is
it goes
Ruby's way of saying the last element in an array.
And the other thing you might not have seen is 3 dots means don't include the last index.
Yeah, exclusive end.
Which, if you forget that, it might make your thing grow into a Stack Overflow.
Yeah, I just did that.
So one goes from the second element -1 to the last one.
Yeah.
If I loaded it, we tried with Unicode characters and it does reverse them.
Oh yes, Aaron's shitlang.
All right, thanks everybody. We're all done here.